Hello friends. Today, I'll tell you one of the most unbelievable survival stories in human history, the crash of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. It's a story about courage, friendship, and what the will to live can truly mean. On October 12, 1972, a small chartered aircraft left Montevideo, Uruguay. On board were 45 people, mostly young rugby players from a local team, along with their friends and family. Their destination was Santiago, Chile, just a few hours away by air. But between these two cities stood one of the most dangerous natural barriers in the world, the Andes Mountains. The longest mountain range on Earth. That day, the weather over the Andes was stormy, so the pilots decided to make an overnight stop in Mendoza, Argentina, before trying again the next day. On October 13th, at 2:18 p.m., the aircraft took off once more. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. Then, as the plane began its descent towards Santiago, it entered thick clouds and severe turbulence. Inside, passengers joked to hide their nervousness, until one of them looked out the window and saw something terrifying. They were flying straight toward a mountain wall. The pilots pulled up desperately, engines roaring at full power. But it was too late. The tail of the plane struck the side of the mountain. The rear section broke off, sending passengers and seats tumbling into the abyss. Moments later, a wing sheared away, and the remaining fuselage slid violently down a glacier, crashing at over 300 kilometers per hour. When the wreckage finally came to rest, it was buried deep in the icy wilderness, 3,570 meters above sea level. Amazingly, 33 people were still alive. Many survivors were badly injured. Two medical students on board, Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino, immediately began helping the wounded. Among the injured was Fernando Parado, unconscious with a head injury. Far below in Chile, search aircraft were dispatched that same evening but found nothing. From the sky, a white plane on white snow was almost invisible. As night fell, temperatures dropped below freezing. 5 injured passengers died before morning. The remaining survivors sealed the broken fuselage with luggage and snow to make a shelter. They believed rescue would arrive soon. It never did. For the next several days, aircraft passed overhead. Each time, the survivors screamed, waved, and spelled SOS in the snow. But no one saw them. They melted snow for water using metal sheets and sunlight. They wrapped themselves in seat covers for warmth. Food was almost gone, just a few chocolate bars, some nuts, jam, and wine. They rationed it carefully. One piece of candy sometimes had to last 2 days. After 11 days, a small radio they found finally worked. It's when they heard the devastating news. The search had been called off. Everyone was heartbroken. Still, they refused to give up. With no food left and no animals or vegetation in sight, they faced the impossible. To stay alive, they made a grim decision to eat the flesh of those who had already died. It was the only way to survive. Many cried as they made that choice, but hunger and the will to live overcame horror. 2 weeks later, tragedy struck again. A sudden avalanche buried the fuselage, suffocating 8 more people. Only 19 survivors remained, trapped under the snow for days before digging their way out. When the storm cleared, they knew one thing: no one was coming to save them. If they wanted to live, they had to find help themselves. The strongest survivors, Parado Canessa and Vizintin, decided to hike out of the mountains. They crafted a sleeping bag from insulation and clothing to survive the freezing nights. On November 15th, they began their expedition, but the terrain was endless: ice and cliffs. Days later, they discovered the tail section of the aircraft with a few supplies and the Flight S radio. They tried to power it using the batteries they found, but it didn't work. They had no tools, no map, and no clear direction. Weeks passed. Another avalanche took 3 more lives. Only 16 people remained. Then, on December 12th, 2 months after the crash, Parado, Canessa, and Vizintin began their final journey westward. The direction they believed led to Chile. Climbing steep slopes without gear, through snow and thin air, they pressed on for days. Eventually, Vizintin turned back to save food for the others. After 9 exhausting days, Parado and Canessa finally reached a valley with a river, and for the first time, they saw signs of life: cows. Moments later, across the river, they spotted a Chilean farmer on horseback. They shouted, but the rushing water drowned their voices. The farmer Sergio Catalan returned the next day with paper and pencil tied to a stone. Parado wrote a note. I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am from Uruguay. We need help. We have no food and cannot move Catalan. Read the message, threw them some bread, and rode for hours to alert authorities. On December 22, 1972, 70 days after the crash, rescue helicopters finally reached the site. 16 survivors were pulled out alive, exhausted, starving, frostbitten, but alive. They had endured hunger, freezing nights, avalanches, and despair. Yet they had refused to surrender. Their story stunned the world. It was called the miracle of the Andes. Not only because they lived through impossible odds, but because they showed what humans can do when hope is stronger than fear. It remains a timeless reminder. When everything seems lost, courage and faith can still lead you home. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life tales of survival and human resilience. Thanks for watching, and remember, where there's will, there's always a way.